Well, good morning again. Glad to see the kids running off to Children's Church. Toby's going to read.
Yeah, I'm going to read, if this is on and you can hear me, I'm going to read Matthew 25, verses 1 through 13, and that's page 830 in the chair Bible in front of you. Matthew chapter 25, starting in verse 1. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, "Here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise answered, saying, "Since there will not be enough for us and for you, go rather to dealers and buy for yourself." And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward the virgins came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he answered, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour."
Good work. By the way, Toby, thanks last week. Super solid. Good to hear that. He preached last Sunday. If you want to see that, it's on the internet. All right? Technology, leveraging it for the kingdom. All right. Well, welcome. We are inviting. This year, our theme is inviting. We're inviting people and ourselves to Christ, to community, and to ministry. All right? And today, invite is kind of a soft word. Really, Jesus has kind of a command today, right? And not everything Jesus is like, well, here, if you feel like it. So we'll get to that. But we're inviting, and if you're new to Grace Life, we are actively becoming disciples of Jesus, and we're making disciples of Jesus. Husbands and wives discipling each other, kids, and formally, informally. We're constantly ongoing, becoming disciples that follow Jesus and making disciples. And it really all rests on 2 basic principles. We experience God's grace, we internalize that, and then we extend it, all right? And so our values are knowing God and His Word, experiencing His grace, and extending that. We grow in healthy relationships and impact those near and far. That's just sort of a natural progression. All starts with God's Word. We value God's Word, and so that's where we're going, okay? And so, knowing, experiencing, growing, impacting. In Matthew 23 and 24 and 25, Jesus invites us to do something. It's more of a command, but I'm sticking with the inviting thing. All right? So that's kind of where we're going. The gospel is God coming to earth to redeem and rescue sinful men and women. That's the gospel, okay? Because we're in rebellion, we're alienated from Him. And so Jesus is the Old Testament Messiah. This is Matthew's thing. And He's expected, we should expect Him to come and heal, forgive, and redeem. And we need to believe that He is who He says He is. That's the invitation of the gospel. Do you believe Jesus is who He says He is? Does Israel believe? And sadly, the answer to that is no. So, we have 4 gospels because they each write to different audiences. Matthew is a Jewish audience. And so we have a lot of Jewish things like prophecy, words of Messiah, son of Abraham, son of David. These kind of things matter. They're very significant, okay? So here's Matthew's goal. His aim is to demonstrate that the kingdom of heaven is near and that Jesus is the king. He invites people to believe Jesus' identity as Messiah, learn from His teaching, live according to the kingdom principles of mercy and compassion in anticipation of the kingdom's full realization. But they said no. We want a king who's going to conquer our enemies. And we've got a verse. Take it out of context, but we got a verse. You ever met people like that? I got a verse. Anyway, let's just take the whole teaching of Scripture. And so they reject Jesus. And the last couple chapters, just so you know where you are on a map, Jesus spends 3 years around the Sea of Galilee, the northern part of the Sea of Galilee. It's called His ministry triangle between Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum, where He spends most of His time. And He spent 3 years in the north debating with the Pharisees. And 3 times they saved His life. One time they said, hey, Herod's guys are coming, you need to leave. I mean, they didn't like Jesus, but they enjoyed the debates. They thought he was just kind of just a goofy teacher. But hey, we'll beat up on you with the Torah if you let us. And so, but they don't kill him. He goes down to Jerusalem, and in 7 days, he's dead. That tells you the level of investment and power that the Sanhedrin has, and they are absolutely not on board with who Jesus is, what he's doing. Okay, so today, this is what we're doing, final exams. Are you prepared? All right? Any stress? The word final exam? I'm sure there's stories. I remember when I was in college, I think the course was Hebrews. Not really sure, because I woke up, I had this massive head cold. I mean, just I can't even think straight, and I had all kinds of, cold medicine. I oversleep. The test is already on, it's running, and I'm getting up and throwing my clothes and run down the hallway, and I forgot, but, and I'm just literally dizzy, and I get to class, I just kind of sit there, and I get the test, and I'm like, I read a question, and I'm like, I should probably know this, but I have really no idea what is going on. And I kind of look up, and there's a girl over there. She just kind of snickers at me and keeps going. But I'm like, I felt like I wasn't prepared, which I wasn't. But anyway, so it reminded me of that movie or that TV show, Millionaire, Regis, who smarter than what's a millionaire show? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Okay, thank you. Anyway, so I'm in my garage. This is like 30 years ago, and I've got a little TV. Remember the old cathode ray, the huge ones? Anyway, I'm doing stuff in the garage, not really paying attention, but it's in the background. And this girl is on there, and this contestant. And the first couple of questions are just super stupid easy. And so the second question, I'm working in the garage, and Regis is like, okay, the magnetic needle of a compass always points in which direction? North, south, east, or west? And I'm kind of like, oh, that's pretty easy. And then I hear the contestant, oh, man, I don't know. I should know this. I just stopped. I'm like, what? And she's like, oh, I'm not like an outdoors person. And I'm like, I'm stunned. I'm just stunned. And Regis is stunned. And he says some comment like, well, these questions, like the early ones are like for like second graders. He said it's just like, and then she phones a friend. She really phoned a friend, and they set that up ahead of time, right? Because the guy, hey, you're gonna on the show. If your friend needs it, be ready by the phone. The phone rings, and hello, and this guy's eager to go, and he reads the question, north, south, east, or west. And there's this pause, and then he says, north. Like, why are you calling me for this? It was just. Anyway, so this contestant, I'm like, dude, you're gonna just drop off in no time. She went through, and she advanced pretty far. Then she gets to French literature. Bang, 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 bang. I'm like, whoa, okay. So we all have our strong points and our weak points. But anyway, the point is final exams can be stressful. But here's the thing. Having taught college for 25 years, what a teacher puts on the final exam is the important stuff, right? We've all had the teachers that random stuff get on there. But anyway, what should be on there is the important stuff. So here's the question. If Jesus gave you a final exam, what would be on it? What is important to Jesus? Is it right theology? It's like, well, his disciples are a ragtag team of all kinds of weird theology. They're not on board. Is it spotless living? Well, no. In chapter 23, he points to the people who are the most spotless living people, the Pharisees, and he says, whoa, 7 times. Apparently, that's not it. I mean, he doesn't tolerate heresy, obviously, but he does tolerate some theological tension as people are on their way to discover who he is. So his final exam is not necessarily about theology or spotless living. It's about mercy and compassion. And that's all the way through. Last week, Toby did a great job of preaching about the king is behold the king. And today it's behold the king, so be ready. He's coming. He has come. Are you ready? All right? So let's go to Matthew 23. We're going to zip through 3 chapters today. Matthew 23. Starting in verse 1. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, The scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So do not observe what they tell you to do. So do and observe what they tell you to, but not the works they do, for they preach, but they do not practice. Okay, so first off, Moses' seat. In the synagogue, Moses' seat was a literal stone seat where the teacher with the authority sat and told people, this is what's right, this is what's wrong. So it's a position of authority. The Pharisees and scribes love authority. They love to boss people around, and so they love that. I'm up front, I'm a big deal, right, and I have the authority. They love that. And Jesus, this is interesting. Because how many of us know some people who they kind of come close to Jesus or church or Christianity, but then their exit ramp is hypocrites. Well, I know this person and that person are hypocrites, so forget the whole thing. Jesus doesn't seem to give us that exit ramp, does he? He's like, yeah, I know, horrible teachers, but you can't just leave because the textbook is good. Good textbook, horrible teacher, take the textbook, leave the teacher. Isn't that interesting? So just in case you run into that. Anyway, so Moses' seat, that's what they're doing here. And so here's kind of where we're going. Remember the Old Covenant. This is kind of the worldview of the first century because Jesus jumps into the world middle of the Old Covenant story. So the Jews and the Pharisees especially are thinking, well, ever since Moses got the law is forever. It is just the way things work, and that's just how they understood that. And so, verse 4, he's still talking about the Pharisees and the scribes. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear. They lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with a finger. They do all their deeds to be seen by others. They make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. Don't you hate that? I mean, just the other day in Walmart, I'm like, look at those phylacteries. Anyway, and they love the place of honor and feasts and the best seats in the synagogue and the greetings in the marketplace, being called rabbi. So they are all about themselves, all right? And so here, we're going to take a little detour here. This is Deuteronomy chapter 6. What does this mean? I'm going to invite you into the worldview of the Pharisee. I'm just going to read this to you. If you're online, this is Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. These words that I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Okay? Pull out a piece. This is the second exam today. Pull out a piece of paper, and what does it mean? What does that mean? Here's the parts that the Pharisees went wrong with. It has to be on your heart. Where's my heart? It's right here about, right? Okay. It shall bind them as a sign on my hand. So I have to somehow get it on my hand. Between my eyes, and right at the doorpost of the house. Here is a picture of an Orthodox Jew doing exactly that. That little box on his head, right? They write down, keep super tiny font. They write down key parts of the Torah, roll it up, and stick it in the box because Deuteronomy 6 says it should be on my head. The phylacteries are those bands around the arm. That's what a phylactery is. And they would make them broad and fancy. Imagine maybe put sequins and daisies and sprinkles on them to attract attention. That's the essence of what they're doing. Like, look at me. And it's on that left arm because the left arm's closer to the heart. And when I went to Jerusalem a long time ago, the gates, hotel rooms, they all have a little plastic thing that represents the Torah. And whenever they go in or come out, they just touch it. They touch it. Do you think that's what Deuteronomy 6 is about? Wearing a thing on your head? What's the point of this passage? The point is to be 24/7 thinking about God and who he is and what he wants. That's the point. It's a metaphor. It's a figure of speech. Don't go literal when it's inviting a figure of speech. Okay, so this is the worldview of the Pharisees. Okay, that's just kind of what you get. Anyway, We'll leave that up there. So now we go on here, and so that's where they're coming from. And so then Jesus goes, the rest of the chapter, he has 7 woes, okay? But this is the hornet's nest that Jesus creates. He shows up and he says, you know what, the Mosaic law, it's not forever. In fact, it's over with me. I end it. I fulfill it. It really never was supposed to be forever. It pointed to me, and now I'm here. So you, the experts in the law, your final exam was to look at the old covenant and anticipate a Messiah like me. But they didn't, okay? So Jesus says, no, the law ends, the promise is fulfilled, and so we have the New Testament. Jesus, the Son of Man, is Lord of the Sabbath, Lord of the temple, Lord of the law, and that's just hard for them to understand. So I'm going to zip through chapter 23. He says, woe to you, Pharisees, you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. And you know what? The purpose of the law was to open the kingdom for people, not to shut them out, right? And number 2, woe to you, your converts are lost as you are. He actually says when you make a convert, you make the Pharisees, you make them twice as much a son of hell as you are. That's not nice, but it's true, okay? Number 3, woe to you, you swear by the temple, but that's not the main thing. He's like, the temple, God is the main thing. Why are you focused on the temple? Number 4, woe to you, you follow the law, but you neglect justice, mercy, and faithfulness. The law is supposed to lead you to doing justice and mercy and faithfulness, and now you're shutting those out. It's all backwards. Okay, number 5, 6, and 7. Woe to you. You look good on the outside, but inside you're full of greed and self-indulgence, hypocrisy and lawlessness. And the law was meant to eradicate those things through faith in God, but now those things are stirring up in your soul. Number 7, you killed the prophets I sent, and you will kill the prophets I will send, just like your fathers did. Wow, that's a stinging indictment, all right? And so that's chapter 23. Whoa, 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 wrong, 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 wrong. So the disciples, you know, they're like, okay, I guess we don't follow them, you know what I mean? So that's kind of where that's going on. That raises the question, what's the purpose of the law? Going to take a little bunny trail here, short but sweet. 2 slides on this. The purpose of the law is to reveal and magnify sin. Did you know this? Maybe you grew up with the 10 Commandments in your kitchen, and you're just like, every morning, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. What do I do? Okay? So the 10 Commandments are not a guide to live a better life. They do not make us better. They certainly don't make us acceptable to God if we do them. The whole point is nobody can do them. They condemn us. We fall short. And if you stare at the law, it's basically shouting with a pointy finger, shaming you. You're a failure. You can't measure up. You fall short. You're sinful. That's the message of the law, okay? For by works of the law, Romans 3:20 says, no human being will be justified in God's sight, since through the law comes knowledge of sin. How many of us have that experience? We didn't want to do something until we knew we shouldn't do the thing. Like kids. Don't eat any cookies off this plate. All of a sudden, it's the single focus of the kid. Like, I must do this. Romans 5:20 and 21. Now, the law came to increase trespass. See that? The purpose to magnify it. But where sin increased, grace abounded all the more, so that as sin reigned in death, grace also might reign through righteousness, leading to eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. So it stirs it up. And so if you want to think of an illustration, it's like the mirror. The mirror is not designed to make you look better. It's simply designed to reflect your condition, right? You look in the mirror this morning and you're like, need some work. But you don't take the mirror and rub it on your face. You use other tools. Jesus uses the law that way. You look at the law, it reflects your condition, but it can't help you. You need to turn to Jesus, okay? Second slide, the last slide on this little bunny trail. The purpose of the law, after stirring up, magnifying sin, it's to lead us to Jesus. Galatians 3:23. Now before faith came, we were held captive under the law, imprisoned until the coming of faith, that would be Jesus, would be revealed. So then the law was our guardian or our tutor until Christ came, in order that we might be justified by faith. But now that faith has come, we're no longer under a guardian. For in Christ Jesus, you are all sons of God through faith. Jews and Gentiles, everybody approaching through faith. Now, some people look at this and go, oh, well, then you're just saying you can just believe in Jesus and go crazy. Okay, what you're discounting is the new regenerate heart of love, that now we're spiritually alive and we desire to please God. We want to. Zoom way out. Old Testament, have to. New Testament, want to. Okay? That's the whole Bible, kind of. Anyway, so this is what they're up against. This is what Jesus is up against. But the law doesn't justify. It can't justify. It was never designed to justify. It was always designed to condemn. So I invite you, if you are a Christian that are focusing on the law, there's a better gospel, okay? And it's the gospel of grace. All right, so the law is inadequate, all right? And so that's where we're going. So let's go to chapter 23. Again, we're summarizing the application here. Engaging the law should lead to an increase of justice, mercy, and compassion. It shouldn't result in an increase of arrogance, self-centered, self-serving, like the Pharisees. The Pharisees loved honor. They loved themselves. They twisted the text for their own sake. They do not love others. And so if your version of the gospel makes you exclusive, angry, judgmental, bitter, probably have a Pharisee gospel. You know what I mean? The gospel of Jesus should result in increased mercy and compassion. And so here's kind of the theme that we've been looking at from Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light. It's easy and light because he's the one doing the work of saving, okay? That's what's going on here. So, classic verse. All right? So, mercy and compassion echoed and sprinkled throughout the Gospel of Matthew. He says early on, I desire mercy and compassion, all right? Have you ever slept in a truck stop or a Walmart parking lot? Done that a number of times. Last week we did both. We went to Utah and slept in a Walmart parking lot once, in a truck stop, in a van. And it's just quick. You pulled in late, and so we pulled in, and it's a truck stop. There's lots of spaces. So you pull in, you got some space around you. And no sooner had we pulled in and stopped that this pickup like a race, just flies in 18 inches from us. Probably 2 feet, but it's 18 in my head, right? And just like, stops. And I literally can't even open the door. I'm like, well, you got the whole truck. And I'm just annoyed. I'm just like, ugh. So we, whatever we do, we get ready for bed, we go to sleep, and Donna's asleep, and I'm like, these people got all these spaces. And then I'm thinking about this, because I'm reading about this, and I'm like, what would Jesus do here? He would have mercy and compassion, but how do I do that? And it's like, well, it's late, I can't go over and like, hey. And in the morning, we got up super early and left, and she or he or whoever was still sleeping. But I thought, I probably should make him coffee. But I didn't want to like, hey, wake up. I'm a Christian. Here's coffee. Anyway, so my point was the law would say, you're annoying, you're inconsiderate, you're unsuitable for highway traffic. You just don't know how to behave. But Jesus would be, he would have mercy and compassion. All right? Anyway, so we'll get back to that later. But so Matthew 24. Let's get to 24. Jesus is walking in Jerusalem around the temple with his disciples, and his disciples go by the Herod's temple that he had just finished rebuilding, remodeling, and it's amazing. It's one of the most unique things that he did. And they say, Teacher, look, what massive stones. In Mark, it says that, but here in Matthew 24, Jesus left the temple, was going away with his disciples, came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. So they're looking at Herod's temple, and I got pictures, okay? Herod's temple remodeling project is insane. I mean, some of the stones, the one stone is 45 feet long, okay? 12 feet by 15 feet, 600 tons. That weighs as much as 2 747s full of people, fuel, and luggage. And they're dry fit, which means there's no mortar. They're engineered and shaped so perfectly. In some places, you can't fit a piece of paper between them. Still. And so Herod's stones always had this little frame or 2.5-inch border frame. The top is built by Muslims much later on, but these are Herod's stuff right here. And so this is what the temple looked like when the disciples were running around. This is called Robinson's Arch, because in 1834 a guy named Robinson discovered it, but it wasn't called that to Jesus, people. But it's just how they got in the temple. So what we're getting to here is that the disciples are amazed by the engineering of the temple, and Jesus says, "Yeah, you know what? Look at the next verse. You see all these things? Truly I say to you, there will not be here left one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." And they're like, whoa, wow, end of the world. That's a big deal. So look at on this slide, I've got this area in the square rectangle. When the Romans attack in AD 70, those stones are shoved down here onto the floor, onto the valley, or the floor. This thing is completely broken. So keep that in mind. This is where the arch was, and all these stones were falling down here, and I've been here. You walk along here. This was the main street. The disciples, no doubt, walked this several times. So here are the big stones that were smashing the sidewalk. All of this stuff was under dirt and has been excavated. And this is where I tried to make where the bridge thing used to be, but it used to be up there. Anyway, so that's kind of what's going on here. And so Jesus is saying the temple is going to be destroyed. And naturally, they're like, when? What are the signs? And this is the next verse, verse 3. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came privately and said, well, tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Here they're thinking, when that happens, it's the end of the age, and then the future age is they're back to back. Okay? This is how they thought. Remember, they don't understand the church age. They have no knowledge that in between these two things, there's an entire period of 2,025 years so far called the church age. They don't know that. They're thinking one stops, the other starts, but they're about to be introduced to some tension, all right? So this is, when will these things be? This is how they thought of it. They were here, and they're anticipating the kingdom. They think the kingdom flips from old to age to come with the destruction of the temple, the coming of Messiah, conquering Rome, the Spirit, resurrection, and that's not how it happens, okay? But that's what they thought. And Jesus is showing that there's space between these two events where there's great suffering for Israel, there's apostasy in the church, and the gospel will be preached all over the place. Chapter 24, verse 4. See, no one leads you astray. Many will come saying, I'm the Christ. They will lead many astray. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Don't be alarmed. This has to take place. But it's not the end. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning. So you can't look at this and go, well, that's the end. Like if Russia and China start a world war, that's not the end. It's the beginning. Okay, that's what he says, war. Anyway, and they'll put you up to death and tribulation. And verse 9, you'll be hated by all. Many will fall away. So there's great trials and tribulation. In verse 14. The gospel will be proclaimed to the whole world, and then the end will come. One of the great difficulties, hermeneutically, theologically, is looking at chapter 24 and drawing a line. When does it go into the future? It's a very notoriously difficult thing to do. And which kind of makes me wonder if that's the main point, and we really can't figure it out, might be a clue that maybe that's not the main point. All right? We'll get there. So we understand that between the age they were in and the future kingdom age, that there is a whole bunch of stuff. We have the whole New Testament. They didn't. We understand that there's the rapture, the tribulation, the second coming, the millennium, the judgment of the nations, the great white throne, all that stuff we know about. We know that there's stuff in the middle here. They didn't know that, and their brains are just exploding, right? And so, all right. Behold the King. He's coming. You need to be prepared. This is where he's going. So the second question is, what's the sign? You go to 24:15. I've kind of drawn the line here, but so therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, standing in the temple, the holy place, let the reader understand. It's kind of like, stick with me here. This is hard to understand, but stick with me here. The sign, he talks about the prophecy of Daniel, all right? Okay, I forgot to show you this to you, but anyway. They were there, we're here. We have this space in between. Jesus came, he was crucified, he will come back. This is the rapture. The rapture is not the second coming. Okay, the second coming is when he comes. The second coming is after the rapture, whenever the rapture is, and then resurrection of the dead. So the point is, the disciples find themselves in this already not yet. The kingdom is underway, but there's more in the future, and we do too. The rapture could be like tomorrow or in 1,000 years, all right? So we won't sell everything and go wait in the park for Jesus to come. Just saying that's not how he wants us to roll. Okay, so here's Daniel. Jesus references this. He says this, the Antichrist will make a strong covenant with many for a week, half a week. He'll put an end to sacrifices, which means they're going on in the temple. On the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate until the decree is poured out on the desolator. So King Artaxerxes made a decree, and the triumphal entry, you go to the day by the not the solar calendar, but the lunar calendar, which they had. It works out to the day. Typically, we look at these as weeks of years, 70 years, the whole prophecy thing. And typically, this is where we all fall off the truck. We read this, and we never come back to the main point that Jesus is trying to make because we get lost in this. Timelines and this and that, okay? It's Gorbachev, the Antichrist, with the, all this stuff, okay? And it's important because he's trying to answer the question, but the point seems to be there's a future reality. The abomination of the temple, it seems to be a future person. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple. Take away the regular burnt offering, which means they're going on. They shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. So the Antichrist sets up in the temple an idol of himself and demands to be worshipped. Obviously, that's desecrating the temple, okay, sometime in the future. So his disciples are like, oh, cool stones, this is great. And Jesus is like, yeah, that's all fallen away. Physically, but also symbolically, the whole temple system, I'm here to update, replace, and fulfill. And so that's where he's going with that. Okay, so it seems to be a person, all right? I know there's great debate. Maybe you're studying this. Is the abomination of death? It probably wasn't the zealots, because the zealots didn't introduce idolatry in the temple. It doesn't make sense. The Romans, well, they desecrated the temple and destroyed it in AD 70, but the whole thing about those in Judea, tell them to run away, by the 2 years before the temple's destroyed, most everybody had left because Rome is attacking Jerusalem, so that doesn't make sense. So I think it's a future thing, but that's not on the final test. We'll just keep going here. Okay, his point is verse 16. Then those who are in Judea flee the mountains, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. And then he gets into a whole bunch of stuff here about the fig tree, verse 32. You look at the fig tree and you see the blossoms, you're like, summer's here. We're looking at that. We start to see things bloom. We're like, hey, spring is coming and summer's here. And he's like, you can see that, and so you see these signs I'm telling you about. You should know that at the end of time, the Son of Man is coming very quickly, very near at the gates. And then he says, this generation will not pass away until all these things taken place. That, in Matthew, always means his immediate people. It doesn't mean, all eternity. In other words, he's saying, you guys are going to see these things. In AD 70, you're going to see Rome destroy the temple and destroy Jerusalem. You're going to see apostasy in the church. You're going to see false teachers, false Christs. You're going to see these things. Now, certainly those things represent bigger things that will come in the future, but you're going to see the first things, the primary things. And so the point here, that as I read this over and over, I'm like, I don't think eschatology is on the final exam. I think you can go to heaven if you're pre-trib, mid-trib, or post-trib. It doesn't seem to be what saves us. So there's something else on the final exam here that I think right here in our culture we miss, just like the Pharisees. And that's mercy and compassion for the lowly and the outcast, and for the people that park too close to you in a truck stop. All right? All right, so then he goes in chapter 24, verse 36. The son, it's like the days of Noah. They're doing their stuff, and the flood comes and takes away some. They were unaware, and his point is they were not expecting that. Verse 40, 2 men are in the field, one is taken away. He was just doing his field work, and then boom, taken away. He wasn't expecting that. 2 women are grinding at the mill, one is taken away. And the point is, therefore stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. That's the point. Be prepared. Behold the king, be prepared. This is the driving glue that holds these chapters together. Be prepared, because he's coming and you don't know when he's coming. Then I love this next part here, okay? And again in verse 44, the Son of Man is coming when you don't know. Verse 45, read this slowly with me. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom his master has set over his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Doing what? Giving them food at the proper time. What does it take to give a family food at the proper time? Planning, shopping, thinking ahead, making decisions, using your time to prepare. When I was in seminary, I lived with this, 2 of my seminary friends lived with an older lady, Mrs. Gregory. She's 94 years old, and we had a lot of fun with her. We'd take her walker and tilt it, and you boys, you know what I mean? And anyway, she had a good sense of humor. And where am I going with this now? Just a bunch of stuff ran through my head. Oh, yeah, so it was my turn to make supper once, and I thought, I'm going to make Jell-O. And supper's at 6. I started like at 5:35. And you're laughing. I didn't know. So I follow the instructions, like hot water, Jell-O, and I'm like, it's like hot Kool-Aid. Where's the Jell-O? And then I read, put it in the refrigerator for like 4 hours. I'm like, well, that's not happening. So I didn't know that's the Jell-O. So the point is, I wasn't prepared to put food on the table on time, because it takes time, and you have to look ahead, and you're like, okay, tonight at 6, I'm going to make Jell-O for supper. Let's see, church is until noon. I'll stop by Aldi. You know what I mean? It just takes time. And so Jesus is saying, here's an example of a servant who is thinking ahead, using their time to be faithful to the master. I'm going to get supper on the table for everybody by this time. And I would argue in our culture it's a lot easier. They don't have microwaves. You know what I mean? So they go to the market, go to garden, all that stuff. Okay, anyway. So, preparing. But if you're a wicked servant, verse 48, the wicked servant is like, whatever, I'm going to do my own thing. Skip the Jell-O, I'm just going to go do my own thing. All right? Hang out with drunkards and do all this, and so that's the problem. All right? So, chapter 25. Parable. Matthew typically does this in his writings. He records Jesus teaching some things, and then Matthew follows that teaching with a parable that illustrates Jesus' teaching. And here there are 3 parables in Matthew 25. All 3 of them go back to the central point of mercy and compassion are on the final exam. Being externally super cool like the Pharisees is not. All right? The first story is the 10 virgins who are waiting for the bridegroom. They have oil, and 5 of them didn't plan ahead. They weren't thinking like, wait a second, it's getting to the afternoon here. If he comes at night, let's go to the market, let's buy some. 5 of them are like, I'm doing my own thing, whatever. And then he comes at night. And the five women are like, oh, hey, we want oil. I always found it interesting that the other 5 are like, no. You had your chance. I'm like, okay, interesting, right? Because at the end of time, when you're standing before the judgment of Jesus, and he's like, what did you do with the sacrifice of my son? That's too late to go like, well, can I go back a bit? And all right. So here's the result of the first parable. Are you prepared? Be prepared, because you don't know when the Son of Man is coming back. He could come back at night. So spend your time investing in kingdom things ahead of time while you can. Use your time like someone preparing dinner at 6 p.m., okay? That's the spirit of that. The next story is about the talents. Now, that word talent, it throws us because we're like, ooh, they're like musical. They're talented. A talent is simply a unit of money, okay? In fact, I found out, one talent is 20 years worth of wages. That's a lot of money, all right? Especially because the first guy gets 5 talents. That's 100 years of money. That's a lot of money. The number 2 guy gets 2 talents. That's a lot of money. And 1 talent, 20. Yeah, anyway, so you go on here. But the point as it goes through here, the first guy doubles his money. You gave me 5, here's 10. The second guy, you gave me 2, here's 4. The third guy's like, I know you're just super demanding, so I just stuck it in the ground, and here you go. I'm giving it back to you. But he's like, you wicked servant. Wow, he seems to come unglued, right? And so here, and Jesus says, verse 28, take the talent, the money from him, and give it to those that have 10. For everyone who has, more will be given. He will have an abundance. But from the one who has not even what he has will be taken away. Even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant, unbeliever, into the outer darkness. In that place there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. This would be the Pharisees. You've been given the riches of the prophets, the Torah, the temple, everything points to Jesus. But no, no. So you're thrown out, and so the point here for them, be prepared because the master has equipped you with resources, and you are an accountable steward who is expected and required, more than just invited, to use those resources for the king's purposes. This is the point of this parable, all right? It's interesting that these resources are measured in your response to other people, how you invest in other people, all right? And the final judgment here, this is the sheep and the goats. Maybe you've heard Keith Green from the 70s, great music, but it's about the sheep and the goats. The sheep are on his right, and he says, I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you welcomed me. Verse 36, I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, you visited me. I was in prison, you came to me. Okay, just stop right there and ask, what kind of people don't have food, don't have water, are naked, hungry, abandoned, in jail? These are the lowly and the outcast people. These are not normal people, okay? And so the sheep care for these socially outcast people. They serve them, they love them, they give to them. They're showing mercy. But the wicked don't give them any food. They don't give them any water. They don't do those things like the Pharisees. They fail the final test because the final test is not about looking good. It's about being transformed in your heart and showing mercy to annoying drivers at the truck stop. All right? And other people. Okay. So then the king will say to those on his right, come, you're blessed, inherit the kingdom. But to those on his left, depart from me, you're cursed, into eternal fire. So you have quite the polarization. And he says, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you didn't do it to me. And as you did do it to the least of these, you did it to me. And so the final exam is not theology. And good theology is essential. We're not talking about tolerating heresy. It's just that, especially in this passage, we can go down the very path that the Pharisees went down and not end up with being challenged by mercy and compassion. And that, I think, is what Jesus is driving at. Fascinating to me, right? Fascinating to me. And so, again, the last one here. Be prepared because you'll be judged according to the mercy you show the lowly. Wow. That's the final exam right there, all right? Surprising, okay? And so, mercy and compassion show up all through Matthew. In fact, in Hebrew, Hosea 6:6, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than the burnt offering. So it's everywhere in the Old Testament. It's the heart of God. If Jesus was going to give you a final exam, here it is. Jesus invites, kind of commands us to be his disciples who, through the transformed hearts, anticipate and prepare for his return by loving the lowly and the outcast. The law should invite us to discover, I fall really short here. I don't have a shot. But Jesus fulfilled the law, so through faith in him, I can be right before God because Jesus was the perfect sacrifice. And as I'm transformed, my heart should, over time, develop compassion for the outcast, the people with no food, with no water, in prison and just socially outcast. and for people that don't drive like we want them to. I mean, seriously, that's where we live. You know what I mean? We're just like, oh, these drivers. So what does it look like to have compassion like Jesus would have in this weird little normal daily things? That's kind of challenging to me, and I hope it's a challenge to you. So here's the final exam for Matthew. It's about mercy and compassion. Are you studying for the right exam? You don't want to get to the exam, look at the first question like, is this the right class? All right? He doesn't test us about our knowledge of the law or even if we follow it to the letter. He wants to know if you've met him, saving faith, and through a transformed heart, love lowly and annoying people. That's the final exam. And that's kind of surprising because 99% of my exposure to this passage has been the whole eschatological timeline and here and there, and which is important, but I never really heard about mercy and compassion. Isn't that funny? Sad? Funny? All right, anyway. So, Lord, we're grateful for your mercy and compassion. You know, you just seem to kind of, the magnetic needle of your heart always points to mercy and compassion. Everyone around you, not so quick to pick that up. And we just confess in our world, we are slow to do that too. I just am excited about the opportunity to have fresh eyes to see those around me. I pray for the people in this, hearing my voice, that as we run into people, that we would respond to them with your mercy and compassion and just really sense your joy and love in doing so. Amen.